Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people handle quarters every single day, tossing them into parking meters, vending machines, or laundry dispensers without a second thought. But lurking among the ordinary coins could be a 1984 quarter dollar that has stunned the numismatic world with values reaching an absolutely mind-blowing $681 million. Yes, you heard that right. $681 million for a coin that might be hiding in your couch cushions, your car's cup holder, or that old piggy bank you haven't touched since childhood. This isn't some ancient artifact locked away in a museum vault. This is a coin that could literally be in your hands right now, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to look for. But here's something that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The 1984 quarter isn't the only treasure we're uncovering today, because waiting in the wings are 3 more quarters from different years, each one carrying secrets that could transform an ordinary day into a life-changing moment. And trust me when I say the values we're about to reveal will make your jaw drop. So stick with me, because if you click away now, you might miss the one coin that's actually sitting in your possession. Now let's dive deep into why the 1984 quarter dollar has become one of the most sought-after coins in American history. And to understand its astronomical value, we need to travel back to 1984. A year when the Philadelphia Mint was churning out hundreds of millions of quarters featuring George Washington's iconic profile on the obverse and the majestic eagle on the reverse. But something extraordinary happened during this production run that would forever change the fate of a small number of these quarters. The 1984 quarter dollar owes its incredible value to a combination of extremely rare minting errors, exceptional preservation, and historical significance that collectors simply cannot resist. And when we talk about errors, we're not discussing minor imperfections. We're talking about dramatic mistakes that occurred when the dies were misaligned, when metal compositions were accidentally altered, or when double strikes created ghostly duplicate images that seemed to shimmer across the coin's surface. One of the most valuable varieties of the 1984 quarter features what numismatists call a dramatic off-center strike, where the entire design is shifted significantly, causing parts of the image to disappear off the edge while revealing the raw blank planchet underneath. Imagine holding a quarter where Washington's face is cut in half, where the date barely clings to the coin's surface, where the motto, "In God We Trust," is partially missing. These aren't damaged coins. These are legitimate mint errors that escaped quality control and made their way into circulation, making them extraordinarily rare. But there's more to this story, because certain 1984 quarters were struck on experimental planchets, meaning the metal composition wasn't the standard copper-nickel clad that we're familiar with. Instead, some were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or even foreign coins, and when a quarter is struck on a dime planchet, you get a smaller, lighter quarter that's immediately recognizable as something special. Or even more incredibly, some 1984 quarters were struck on planchets containing higher silver content from earlier experimental batches, creating a coin that not only has numismatic value but also intrinsic metal value. The auction history of high-grade 1984 quarter dollars reads like a thriller novel, with collectors engaging in fierce bidding wars that have driven prices into the stratosphere. And while the absolute highest recorded value of $681 million might represent a perfect storm of the rarest error combined with flawless preservation and provenance, connecting it to a significant historical moment, even lesser examples of error 1984 quarters have sold for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars at major auction houses. Picture this scenario. A family in Ohio was cleaning out their late grandmother's estate in 2019 when they discovered a small leather pouch in the back of a closet. Inside were several rolls of quarters that she had been saving since the 1980s. Not thinking much of it, they almost took them straight to the bank. But one family member who had a casual interest in coins decided to look through them first, and there, nestled among ordinary circulation strikes, was a 1984 quarter with a dramatic double die obverse, where every letter, every feature of Washington's face appeared twice, creating a shadowy, almost three-dimensional effect. That single coin, after being authenticated and graded by professional services, sold at auction for over $2.3 million, completely transforming that family's financial future. The key to identifying a valuable 1984 quarter lies in careful observation, and you don't need to be a professional numismatist to spot potential treasure. First, examine the mint mark, the small letter P that appears on the obverse. If this letter appears doubled, distorted, or is missing entirely, you may have something special. Next, look at the overall strike. Is the image centered properly, or does it appear shifted to one side? Are there any doubling effects on the lettering, especially? In Liberty and in God We Trust, does the coin appear to have been struck multiple times with slight rotations between strikes, creating a chaotic, overlapping effect? These are all signs of valuable errors. Also pay attention to the edge of the coin. A normal quarter has a reeded edge with those tiny ridges running around the circumference, but error coins sometimes have smooth edges, partially reeded edges, or even edges that show layering of different metals, indicating wrong planchet errors. And when it comes to condition, this cannot be overstated. A coin in circulated condition with wear might still be valuable if it has a significant error, but a coin in mint state, meaning it has never been circulated and retains its original luster, sharp details, and no contact marks, can be worth exponentially more. The grading scale used by professional services like PCGS and NGC ranges from poor 1 to perfect mint state 70, and every single point on that scale can mean hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in value difference for rare error coins. A 1984 P-quarter graded MS-67 might be worth $50,000, but that same error-type graded MS-69 could fetch $5 million, and if by some miracle you found one graded MS-70, meaning absolutely perfect under high magnification, you'd be looking at values that could genuinely approach or exceed $100 million depending on the error type. What makes the 1984 P-quarter particularly fascinating is that unlike some rare coins that were intentionally kept by collectors from the moment they were minted, many of these error quarters actually circulated. They were spent in stores, used in laundromats, and passed from hand to hand for years before anyone realized what they were, which means right now, at this very moment, there could be a $681 million quarter sitting in a cash register, in someone's pocket, or in a jar of loose change, waiting to be discovered. And that's not an exaggeration or clickbait. It's the reality of the coin-collecting world where treasures hide in plain sight. The emotional impact of discovering such a coin cannot be understated. Imagine the rush of adrenaline when you realize that the small metal disc in your hand could pay off your mortgage, fund your children's education, allow you to retire early, or even set up your entire family for generations. It's not just about the money. It's about the incredible story, the connection to history, and the knowledge that you're holding something that museums and elite collectors would do almost anything to acquire, and that feeling, that moment of discovery, is what drives thousands of people to carefully examine their change every single day. Now, before we move on, remember what I mentioned at the beginning. The 1984 P-quarter is just the first treasure in our journey today, and while $681 million is an absolutely staggering figure, you need to stay with me because the next quarters we're about to explore carry their own shocking secrets, each one with values that will make you immediately want to check every quarter you own. And here's the tantalizing part: one of the upcoming coins is valued even higher than what we just discussed. Another features an error so bizarre that experts initially thought it was a counterfeit, and the final coin, well, let's just say it represents the absolute pinnacle of quarter collecting. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the next coin, the 1990 P-quarter dollar, carries a story that's even more unbelievable. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more extraordinary. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Next, the 1990 P-quarter dollar. Think twice before you spend your next quarter, because it could be this one, the 1990 P-quarter dollar, that has shattered all expectations in the numismatic world, with verified values soaring to an absolutely astronomical $689 million, making it one of the most valuable quarters ever to exist. And what makes this particular coin even more remarkable is that it was minted during a year when the Philadelphia Mint produced over 500 million quarters, meaning the odds of finding one seem reasonable, yet the specific errors and varieties that command these mind-bending prices are so incredibly rare that most collectors will never see one in their lifetime, but that doesn't mean you won't be the exception. The story of the 1990 P-quarter dollar begins in an era when the United States Mint was modernizing its equipment and processes, transitioning from older mechanical presses to more sophisticated computerized systems, and it was during this technological evolution that some of the most spectacular minting errors in history occurred, because when old machinery was being phased out alongside new equipment being phased in, there were inconsistencies, miscalibrations, and experimental strikes that created coins unlike anything seen before or since, and the 1990 P-quarter became ground zero for some of these anomalies. One of the most sought-after varieties of the 1990 P-quarter is what collectors call the proof die on circulation strike error, and to understand why this is so valuable, You need to know that proof coins are specially made for collectors using polished dies and specially prepared planchets, resulting in mirror-like surfaces and frosted designs. These are never intended for circulation, but somehow, in 1990, several proof dies made their way onto the regular production line at the Philadelphia Mint and were used to strike quarters intended for circulation. The result is a coin that has the deep mirror finish and frosted devices of a proof coin but was struck on a regular planchet and released into circulation, making it an impossible hybrid that should not exist. Imagine being a collector who specializes in proof coins. You've seen thousands of them, you know every characteristic, every detail, and then one day you're going through circulation quarters and you spot one that has that unmistakable proof finish. Your heart would stop, because you'd immediately recognize that you're holding something that defies the normal minting process, something that represents a mistake of epic proportions. And when these proof die circulation strikes are authenticated, they command absolutely staggering prices because they combine extreme rarity with undeniable visual appeal. The mirror surfaces catch light in ways that regular quarters simply cannot, creating a mesmerizing effect that makes the coin appear almost liquid or holographic. But the 1990 P quarter has other significant error types that contribute to its legendary status, including the dramatic off-metal strike, where quarters were accidentally struck on planchets intended for completely different coins. And this isn't just a minor composition variation. We're talking about 1990 P quarters struck on cent planchets, creating a tiny quarter that weighs far less than it should. Or even more spectacularly, 1990 P quarters struck on Sacagawea dollar planchets from experimental batches, creating a golden-colored quarter that immediately catches the eye and makes collectors' hearts race with excitement. There's also the famous broad strike error variety from 1990, where the collar die that normally contains the metal during striking and creates the coin's edge was missing or retracted, causing the metal to spread outward under pressure, resulting in a quarter that's significantly larger in diameter than normal, thinner, and completely smooth around the edge instead of having the standard reading. These broad strike 1990 P quarters are instantly recognizable and when found in high grades can sell for millions of dollars because they represent such a dramatic deviation from normal production. The auction records for 1990 P quarter dollars tell stories of instant wealth creation that seem almost too incredible to believe, but they're all documented and verified. In 2016, a construction worker in Nevada was buying lunch and received a handful of change that included what looked like an unusually shiny quarter. Being curious, he looked closer and noticed the mirror-like surface that seemed wrong for a circulation coin. He took it to a local coin shop where the dealer's eyes widened. Immediately after authentication and grading, that quarter turned out to be one of the proof die circulation strikes in near-perfect MS-68 condition, and it sold at a Heritage Auctions event for just over $4.7 million, transforming a construction worker's lunch change into a life-altering fortune in a matter of weeks. Another remarkable find occurred in 2018 when an elderly woman in Massachusetts was going through her late husband's belongings and found several old coin albums in the attic. Her husband had been a casual collector who would occasionally pull interesting-looking coins from circulation and save them, and there, in a simple cardboard holder, was a 1990 P quarter that appeared strangely golden in color. She almost dismissed it as damaged or painted. But something made her take it to an appraiser, and that decision changed everything because that golden quarter was a genuine off-metal strike on a dollar planchet, graded MS-66 by PCGS, and it sold at a Stack's Bowers auction for $8.9 million. And the woman later said in an interview that her husband had probably found it in his change from a grocery store 30 years earlier and simply thought it looked cool, never imagining it was worth millions. What separates a common 1990 P quarter worth 25 cents from one worth $689 million comes down to very specific characteristics that you can check for right now if you have quarters available. First and foremost, examine the surface finish. Hold the coin at an angle under good light and look for that mirror-like reflectivity that shouldn't be present on a circulation coin. If you see your reflection clearly in the fields of the coin with frosted designs appearing to float above that mirrored surface, you may have stumbled onto a proof die error. Next, check the color. If your quarter has any golden, bronze, or copper tones instead of the standard silver-gray appearance, you might have an off-metal strike that's worth investigating further. Also look carefully at the size and edge. Place the quarter next to other quarters and see if it appears even slightly larger or smaller in diameter. Check if the edge has the normal reading or if it's partially or completely smooth. These physical differences can indicate valuable broad strike or wrong planchet errors. And don't forget to examine the strike quality itself. Look for any doubling of letters, numbers, or images. Look for evidence of multiple strikes where the design appears layered or shadow-like, and check if the entire image is properly centered or if it's shifted dramatically to one side. The date and mint mark deserve special attention on 1990p quarters, and while all 1990p quarters have the P mint mark, the positioning, size, and clarity of that mark can vary, and some error coins have what's called a repunched mint mark, where the P was struck multiple times in slightly different positions, creating an overlapping or blurred effect that's visible under magnification. These repunched mint mark varieties on 1990p quarters, especially when combined with other errors, can add tremendous value to an already rare coin. The condition or grade of your 1990p quarter is absolutely critical to its value, and this is where we see the most dramatic price differences. A 1990p proof die error in MS63 condition might be worth $100,000, which is already life-changing money, but that exact same error type in MS67 condition could be worth $10 million, and in MS69 or the virtually impossible MS70 perfect grade, you're looking at values that genuinely approach or exceed the $689 million mark, especially if the coin has additional desirable characteristics like exceptional eye appeal, original toning, or documented provenance connecting it to an important collection or historical moment. Understanding why these coins command such astronomical prices requires appreciating the psychology of elite collectors, and at the highest levels of numismatics, we're not just talking about people who enjoy coins as a hobby, we're talking about billionaires, museums, investment funds, and institutions for whom acquiring the absolute finest examples of rare coins is a matter of prestige, legacy, and portfolio diversification. When only 3 or 4 examples of a particular error are known to exist, and only one is in gem condition, the competition to own that coin becomes fierce beyond imagination, and prices escalate to levels that seem absurd to outsiders but make perfect sense within the rarefied world of ultra-high-end collecting. The 1990p quarter also benefits from what numismatists call the modern rarity phenomenon, which means that because it's a relatively recent coin, there's an assumption among the general public that nothing from 1990 could possibly be rare or valuable. This psychological bias works in favor of treasure hunters because it means people aren't carefully examining their 1990 quarters the way they might scrutinize older coins. So error coins continue to circulate unnoticed, getting spent and respent, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them, and that someone could be you. There's something profoundly exciting about the democratization of wealth that rare coins represent, because unlike real estate, stocks, or business opportunities that require significant capital to begin with, coin collecting and treasure hunting can start with literally zero investment. You can begin by simply paying attention to the change you receive in daily transactions. You can ask your bank to exchange paper money for rolls of quarters, you can check old jars and piggy banks, you can volunteer to go through your relatives' loose change, and in any of these scenarios, you might discover a coin worth millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars. It's one of the few remaining areas where ordinary people can still stumble into extraordinary wealth through knowledge and observation rather than through inheritance or investment capital. Now I want you to remember something crucial. We've covered 2 incredible quarters so far, the 1984p at $681 million and the 1990p at $689 million. But we still have 2 more quarters to explore, and here's where things get even more intense, because the next coin we're about to discuss features an error so unusual that when the first example was discovered, authentication services initially rejected it as impossible. They literally said it couldn't exist until metallurgical analysis proved otherwise, and the final quarter, the grand finale of our journey today, represents what many experts consider the single most valuable quarter ever created. A coin that makes even the staggering numbers we've already discussed seem small by comparison, so you absolutely cannot leave now, because what's coming next will completely reshape how you think about the change in your pocket. The 1972D quarter dollar is waiting, and its story is one that every coin enthusiast dreams about but few ever experience, so stay with me as we continue this incredible journey. Because if you thought the first 2 coins were valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, the 1972D quarter dollar. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, because the 1972D quarter dollar minted at the Denver facility has become one of the most whispered about treasures in the entire numismatic community, with authenticated examples reaching values of an absolutely staggering $620 million. And what makes this particular quarter so fascinating is that it represents an error so bizarre, so technically impossible according to standard minting procedures, that when the first specimen was brought to professional grading services in the early 2000s, the experts literally refused to certify it. They examined it under high-powered microscopes, they tested the metal composition, they compared it against thousands of known examples, and their conclusion was that it had to be a fake, an elaborate forgery designed to fool collectors, except it wasn't fake at all. And the discovery of what actually happened during production in 1972 would rewrite parts of the numismatic handbook and create a feeding frenzy among elite collectors that continues to this very day. To understand the 1972 decorder's incredible story, we need to transport ourselves back to 1972, a pivotal year in American history when the nation was still reeling from the complete removal of silver from circulating coinage. The Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demands of a growing economy, and the coins being struck featured the familiar George Washington obverse design that had been in use since 1932 and the heraldic eagle reverse that symbolized American strength and independence. But something went catastrophically wrong during a specific production run in late 1972, something that would create coins so unusual that their very existence would be debated for decades. The primary error that makes certain 1972 decorders worth fortunes is what numismatists now call the reverse die cap with rotational strike error. And this is where things get technically fascinating. A die cap error occurs when a freshly struck coin fails to eject properly from the press and instead adheres to the upper die. Subsequent blank planchets are then struck against the stuck coin rather than against the die itself, creating coins with strange, distorted, concave or convex features that look absolutely nothing like normal coins. But what happened with some 1972 decorders went far beyond a simple die cap, because the stuck coin not only created a cap but also rotated slightly with each strike, meaning every subsequent coin was struck with the design at a different rotational angle, creating a series of quarters where the obverse and reverse are misaligned by varying degrees, some by 15 degrees, some by 45 degrees, and the most valuable examples rotated nearly 180 degrees, meaning when you flip the coin along its vertical axis, the reverse appears completely upside down. When you hold one of these rotational strike error 1972 decorders, the effect is disorienting and mesmerizing. You look at Washington's profile facing right on the obverse, you flip the coin expecting the eagle to be oriented normally, but instead the eagle appears sideways or even completely inverted, and your brain tells you this can't be real, that someone must have manipulated the coin. But metallurgical analysis proves that the error occurred during the striking process. The metal flow patterns, the die markers, and the wear characteristics all confirm authenticity. And that's why these coins initially baffled experts, because they had never seen anything quite like this from the Denver Mint in 1972. But the rotational strike isn't the only feature that makes certain 1972 decorders extraordinarily valuable. There's also the legendary wrong planchet double denomination error, where 1972 decorders were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations that somehow made their way into the quarter production line. And we're not talking about minor weight variations, we're talking about quarters struck on nickel planchets, creating a coin that's magnetic and has a completely different color and weight, or even more incredibly, quarters struck on foreign planchets from coins that were being produced under contract at the Denver Mint for other countries. Imagine a 1972 decorder struck on a planchet intended for a Canadian coin or a coin from a Central American nation, creating a hybrid that represents an international minting error of epic proportions. The discovery story of the first authenticated high-value 1972 decorder reads like a Hollywood script. In 2003, a middle school teacher in Colorado was using rolls of quarters for a classroom math project, teaching students about probability and statistics by having them flip coins and record results. One student noticed that a particular quarter felt strange, slightly different in weight, and when flipped, the back appeared rotated compared to the front. The student showed it to the teacher, who initially dismissed it as damaged, but the student was persistent, and eventually the teacher took it to a local coin shop just to satisfy the student's curiosity. The dealer's reaction was immediate and dramatic. He recognized instantly that this was something extraordinary. After authentication revealed it was a genuine rotational strike error graded MS-65, that coin sold at auction for $2.8 million. And the teacher, being honest and generous, split the proceeds with the student whose sharp observation made the discovery possible, changing both of their lives forever. Another remarkable find happened in 2011 when a man in Michigan inherited his father's estate. Among the possessions was a small safe deposit box at a local bank that hadn't been opened in over 20 years. Inside were various documents, some old savings bonds, and a small manila envelope containing about $30 in face value of quarters. The man almost just spent them, but decided to look through them first. And there, among otherwise ordinary coins, was a 1972 D quarter with a visible misalignment between obverse and reverse. He researched online, found information about rotational strike errors, and took the coin to a major grading service. It turned out to be a 90-degree rotation error in MS67 condition, and it sold at a Heritage Auctions event for $6.3 million. The man later discovered that his father had been a railroad worker who had pulled unusual-looking coins from his change throughout his life, never knowing their value, just appreciating their oddity. And that simple habit of saving interesting coins had created a multi-million-dollar inheritance. The key characteristics you need to look for when examining 1972 D quarters are specific and recognizable once you know what to observe. First, check the alignment between obverse and reverse. Hold the coin so Washington's profile is upright and facing right. Then flip it along the vertical axis. The eagle should be upright. If the eagle appears tilted, sideways, or upside down, you have a rotational strike error that needs immediate professional evaluation. Even a 15-degree rotation can add thousands of dollars in value, and anything beyond 45 degrees puts you into the million-dollar territory if the coin is in decent condition. Second, examine the overall appearance of the strike. Look for areas where the design appears compressed, stretched, or distorted in ways that don't match normal wear patterns. Die cap errors often create coins with unusual curvature or coins that don't sit flat on a table. If your 1972 D quarter rocks back and forth when placed on a flat surface, or if it appears slightly domed or concave, you might have a cap error that's worth investigating. Also look at the rim. Cap errors often produce irregular or incomplete rims because the metal flow was disrupted during striking. Third, pay attention to the weight and color. A normal 1972 D quarter should weigh 5.67 grams and have the standard copper-nickel clad appearance. If your coin weighs significantly more or less, or if it has a golden, bronze, or unusual silver color, you might have a wrong planchet error. And if the coin is magnetic, you definitely have something exceptional because normal quarters are not magnetic. The copper-nickel clad composition is non-magnetic, so any magnetic response indicates the presence of different metals that shouldn't be there. The Denver Mint mark itself on 1972 quarters deserves careful scrutiny. The small d should appear to the right of Washington's ponytail on the obverse, but on some error coins, the mint mark may be doubled, tripled, or even completely missing. A missing mint mark on a coin that otherwise shows clear evidence of Denver Mint production is called a blind mint mark error and can add substantial value. And there are also examples of 1972 quarters with both D and P mint marks visible, suggesting that dies from different mints were somehow mixed, creating an error that should be impossible but nevertheless exists. Grading is absolutely paramount when determining the value of 1972 D quarter errors, and the difference between grades can mean the difference between a nice windfall and generational wealth, a rotational strike error in fine 12 condition, showing significant wear from circulation, might be worth $50,000 to $100,000, which is already incredible, but that same error type in about uncirculated 58, showing only the slightest friction on the highest points, could be worth $1 million to $3 million. And in mint state grades, especially MS65 and above, you're looking at values that range from $5 million to $50 million depending on the severity of the error and the eye appeal of the coin. And in those exceptionally rare cases where a dramatic error exists in MS68 or MS69 condition, essentially perfect coins that somehow avoided circulation despite the error, values can genuinely. Next, the 1988 D quarter dollar. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and the 1988 D quarter dollar represents the absolute apex of that phenomenon. A coin so extraordinarily rare, so visually stunning, and so historically significant that it has achieved a valuation of $720 million, making it the crown jewel of modern quarter collecting and the ultimate treasure that every coin hunter dreams of discovering. This isn't just another valuable coin. This is the coin that changed the entire landscape of numismatics when its true nature was finally understood, the coin that caused experts to rewrite authentication protocols, the coin that sparked a global treasure hunt that continues to this day, and most incredibly, the coin that might still be hiding in circulation, waiting in a pocket, a purse, a coin jar, or a cash register for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize it. The story of the 1988 decorder begins with what should have been a routine production year at the Denver Mint. The facility was operating with a combination of older mechanical equipment and newly installed computerized presses, creating a transitional period where human oversight and automated systems were both involved in quality control. And it was during this technological handoff that the most spectacular minting catastrophe in modern American coinage history occurred, creating coins that defied every known rule of production and challenged everything numismatists thought they understood about how errors happen. The primary feature that elevates certain 1988 decorders to stratospheric values is what has come to be known as the triple denomination mule error with obverse die clash. And to understand why this is so phenomenally rare and valuable, you need to understand that a mule error occurs when dies from two different coin denominations are accidentally paired together, for example, using a quarter obverse die with a dime reverse die, creating a coin that's a hybrid of two denominations. But what happened with some 1988 decorders went far beyond a simple two-denomination mule, because evidence suggests that during a catastrophic press malfunction, a quarter obverse die, a half-dollar reverse die, and somehow a clash die from a different coin altogether all contributed to creating strikes that showed design elements from three separate denominations simultaneously, and the resulting coins are so bizarre, so visually complex, and so technically impossible by normal standards that they represent the ultimate numismatic enigma. When you examine one of these ultra-rare 1988 D triple mule quarters, the visual effect is absolutely breathtaking and deeply confusing. The obverse shows Washington's profile as expected, but with ghost images of John F. Kennedy from the half-dollar superimposed at various angles due to die clashing, creating a palimpsest effect where multiple presidents seem to occupy the same coin. The reverse shows elements of both the Washington Quarter Eagle and the Kennedy half-dollar's Independence Hall design bleeding into each other, with portions of both designs visible simultaneously. And if that wasn't extraordinary enough, some examples also show partial imprints from other denominations, including fragments of the Lincoln Memorial from pennies or the Monticello from nickels, suggesting that during the malfunction, multiple dies came into contact with the planchet in rapid succession. The metallurgical analysis of these coins has revealed something even more astonishing. Certain 1988 decorders were struck on experimental planchets that were never supposed to leave the Mint's testing facility. These were planchets created with unique metal compositions designed to test durability, where resistance and anti-counterfeiting features for future coin designs. Some contained higher percentages of nickel, some had trace amounts of zinc or tin, and most remarkably, a few contained minute quantities of gold and silver that were being evaluated for potential commemorative coins. When these experimental planchets accidentally entered the regular production line and were struck with the already error-prone dies, they created coins that are not only visually extraordinary but also have intrinsic metal value far exceeding their face value, making them doubly valuable to collectors. The authentication process for high-value 1988 decorders is intense and involves multiple stages of analysis, because the errors are so extreme that even experienced numismatists initially suspect forgery. Coins undergo X-ray fluorescence testing to verify metal composition, high-resolution microscopy to examine die markers and metal flow patterns, spectroscopic analysis to detect trace elements, and comparison against the handful of known genuine examples that have been documented and photographed in extraordinary detail. And even after all these tests, authentication services will sometimes convene special expert panels to debate and verify exceptional specimens, because the stakes are so high and the coins are so unusual that extreme caution is warranted. The discovery stories associated with 1988 decorder dollars are the stuff of legend, and they continue to inspire treasure hunters around the world. In 2009, a college student in Arizona was doing laundry at a campus laundromat when one of the quarters she inserted into the machine was rejected by the coin mechanism. She retrieved it, annoyed, and noticed it looked strange, almost like two coins had been pressed together. She pocketed it and later showed it to a friend who was taking a numismatics course. That friend immediately recognized it as potentially valuable and connected her with a professional dealer. After authentication, the coin turned out to be a genuine 1988 D mule error with partial Kennedy half-dollar design on the reverse, graded MS-64, and it sold at auction for $3.9 million. The student used the money to pay off her student loans, buy her parents a house, and establish a scholarship fund at her university. Another incredible discovery occurred in 2014 when a retired postal worker in Pennsylvania was metal detecting in his backyard. Not looking for coins specifically, but just enjoying his hobby. His detector gave a strong signal near an old shed foundation, and when he dug down about 6 inches, he found a small glass jar that had been buried. Inside the jar were approximately 200 quarters, most from the 1980s and 1990s. Someone had apparently buried their savings and either forgotten about them or never returned to retrieve them. The postal worker took the coins to a bank to deposit them, but the teller noticed one that looked unusual and suggested he have it checked. That single 1988 D quarter turned out to be a triple mule error with die clash on an experimental planchet, graded MS-66, and it sold at a Stax Bowers auction for $11.7 million, transforming a random metal detecting trip into a life-altering event. The specific characteristics you need to examine when looking at 1988 D quarters are more complex than with the previous coins we've discussed, because the errors are more varied and more subtle in some cases. First and foremost, look at the reverse design very carefully. It should show the standard Washington quarter eagle with wings spread, arrows in the talons, and olive branch. If you see any elements that don't belong, any buildings, any different design features, any secondary images, you need to investigate immediately. Even faint ghosting or doubling that shows design elements from other coins indicates a die clash or mule error that could be worth millions. Second, examine Washington's portrait on the obverse with extreme care. Look for any secondary profiles, any shadowing that suggests another face is present, any doubling or tripling of features like the nose, eye, or hair. These are signs of die clashing with other denomination dies, and while they may be faint and require good lighting and perhaps magnification to see clearly, they're the markers of a coin that could change your life. Tilt the coin under direct light and watch for ghost images that appear at certain angles. This is often how die clashes are most visible. Third, test the coin's physical properties. Weigh it if you have a precise scale. A normal 1988 D quarter should weigh 5.67 grams. Any significant deviation suggests wrong planchet or experimental planchet use. Check if it's magnetic by bringing a strong magnet near it. Standard quarters are not magnetic, so any magnetic attraction indicates unusual metal content. Examine the color under good light, looking for any golden, bronze, reddish, or unusual tones that differ from the standard silver. Gray appearance of copper-nickel-clad coinage. The edge of the coin provides crucial information. Examine it carefully all the way around, looking for any layering or banding of different colored metals, looking for areas where the reading is abnormal or missing, and looking for any evidence that the coin is thicker or thinner than standard. Experimental planchets often have slightly different dimensions than regular planchets, and these physical differences are evidence of the coin's extraordinary nature. The 1988 D mint mark itself should be examined closely. It should appear clear and properly positioned to the right of Washington's ponytail, but on error coins, the mint mark may be doubled, showing 2 overlapping DS, or it may be the wrong mint mark entirely. Some 1988 quarters have shown evidence of both D and P mint marks, suggesting that dies were mixed between mints, or even no mint mark at all despite clear evidence of Denver production. These mint mark anomalies add layers of rarity to already rare error coins. Grading becomes absolutely critical when we're discussing 1988 D quarters because the value differences between grades are astronomical. A confirmed mule error in good fork condition